Hi, this is a foreigner living in the Philippines. So the questions that we're going to deal with, what we've been asked, is the basic question: what's it like being married to a Filipina? And that's the question that my wife is now asking me to answer. Well, what's it like being married to a Filipino? If someone could have been holding a camera a few minutes ago, you would have known exactly what it's like to be married to a Filipina. We live high in the hills, the mountains of Bohol on Bohol. So we actually live on the family, what has been in the family for about 50 years. It's about 7 or 8 hectares of land. It's a small farm. And I came into this life just completely by accident. I met my wife when I came to the Philippines. I came just over 3 years ago. Been here ever since. I never want really to go back. I won't say that I want to go home because this is my home. But being married to a Filipina, you would have seen a few minutes ago the kind of chaos that comes with being married to a Filipina, especially in this farming community. I'm actually surrounded by about 10 or 15 turkeys, chickens, cats, puppies, dogs, roosters, cocks crowing, dogs barking, children walking back and forth, and the machine gun fire of 3 women just prior to when we started this video. The way that the language goes is when it's being spoken between Filipinas, my mother-in-law, my sister-in-law, and my dear wife, is like machine gun fire, and that's what it's like. It's like being caught in a firestorm. So you have to be able to take all of this and yet not be knocked off your spot, because the rewards are great. The divisions in culture, in way of thinking, are Grand Canyon-esque, is how I like to think of it, or have to think of it. So all of the qualities are very obvious right at the beginning. They're kind, generous. Filipinas are gentle and loving, and they can be all of those things for you all of the time. It requires some judgment to choose the right Filipina. Now, my friend Dan Christiansen, who runs another site called Blind Owl Outdoors, when he came, he told me that he had some basic requirements for meeting and marrying and staying married to a Filipina. She had to be poor, so that she would not expect him to be rich, because he isn't. She would have to have religion. In other words, she would have to be on some kind of a path towards greater spirituality. And she would have to have a good family, a supportive family. And I'm thinking that he probably required that she wasn't a bar girl. Now, it's not that I'm judging bar girls, because they're doing what they are doing and probably supporting an entire family at the back of all that they do. But my wife met all of those requirements. She is on a spiritual path. She's involved in her church, which was built by her brother, Pastor Timio, which if you've seen my other videos, you will have seen all about Pastor Timio. Beth speaks at the church that she's at, and we go over the speeches that she does, all of the talks that she gives. We go over them in the light of the Bible, and yet I'm not a religious person. I'm spiritual, but I'm not in favor of organized religion, which I think of as big business. But Beth doesn't think that way, and her thinking is one which is good for her, and I respect that, and she respects my belief, which means we get along just fine. But I help her with her interpretations of the Bible, which, let's face it, are some of the greatest stories ever told. So A good example of what a Filipina thinks was yesterday. We have a boy here, Balalut, who you may have seen on our other videos. He's 10 years old. He's not attended school for quite a number of years prior to my coming here. He attends school now. The difficulty is that he's missed a lot of teaching. He's missed a lot of the things, the basics that he should have been learning years ago. So the boy's struggling. But to get the boy to attend to lessons, to realize that he needs to work, you have to be firm with him. Now, it's a very simple thing. You reward good behavior and you punish bad behavior. Now that may take, the punishment may take the form of withdrawing privileges. That's the way that I think of it. So, the way that I see it as a foreigner, when kids behave well, they get treated very well. And they get lots of treats. They come with us in the truck, go to see the chocolate hills, all of these things which they love doing, they do. And if they don't behave well, then some of those privileges are withdrawn. And you withdraw a certain amount of the affinity, affection from them, and show that you're displeased. This is the normal way in, certainly in the US, where they say go to your room, and in the UK, where they might say go and stand in the corner. Well, the boy had apparently been ducking out of his lessons, so he'd just come back from a great weekend where he was treated very, very well and given all the treats and special treatment that was based on the assumption that he was now behaving himself. And then we find out that instead of being in class, and the very lax discipline that they have in schools, in public schools here, he was allowed to just go out of the class and goof around outside. Seems incredible to a Westerner. When we found this out, he was told off first of all under machine gun fire by my mother-in-law, and the first I knew of it was I saw him sulking off down the hill. So I asked what was happening, and Beth told me. So I said, call him here. And we called him up to the house, and I asked Beth to translate exactly what I was saying, no more, no less, and not to tell the boy off, to speak to him as if she was giving him information. And it was put to the boy that if he behaved badly, he wouldn't do all of those great fun things that he enjoyed doing and had been given over the weekend, and that in fact I was very disappointed in how he'd been behaving, because if he wanted to have a better life, then he would have to work at his studies right now. All of this it's a no-brainer, isn't it? I can understand that anybody watching this is saying, well, yeah, okay, of course, but the viewpoint here is not the same. After all this, being told off, being read the riot act, if a little gently, being pointed out that he will have his privileges withdrawn, and that life is much, much better, as he had seen over the weekend, if he just did his work. After all of that, and some tears while he's listening to all of this, of course, I said, okay, that's it. Beth turns to me and says, can I give him a crushed chocolate biscuit? So in other words, the misguided kindness in situations where discipline should have been enforced is gone. And this is the life of many young men being brought up by women in the Philippines. They're too kind-hearted. They don't enforce any discipline and don't carry through on things that should be enforced in order to teach the child the difference between good behavior rewarded and bad behavior penalized. can I give him a chocolate biscuit? My sweet, kind-hearted wife couldn't bear to see the child cry. And I had to tell her, no, you can't give him a chocolate biscuit. Because if he gets a chocolate biscuit when he does good, and a chocolate biscuit when he does bad, what incentive is there to behave well and to do well? So that's a good example, a bit long-winded, of how the difference is between how... So right now there's a battle going on between a dog and a cockerel, and they're all charging about the yard. So that's the difference between how a Filipina would see disciplining a child. They tell the child off, and then everything goes straight back to normal, and the child is not penalized in any way. So how different is it to be married to a Filipina? There are sites which are specially for foreigners, where all they talk about, it seems, is the difference between what it's like back home and what it's like here. And of course, this is a third world country. And what gets left behind when these talks are on is that people that are here, foreigners, have moved here because they're able to live much more comfortably, if not well, on the money that they get, which couldn't support them in America, or possibly less so in the UK, where if you're not able to live on what you have, you'll get supplements. People have tried to encourage me to go back to the UK because I would be supported. I cannot imagine anything that I would like less than to be supported. So all of these sites will complain about how bad things are here from a viewpoint of stupidity, whereas it's not actually stupidity, it's a different culture. They're in a different country and they don't allow for that. Now this, I never understand this, that they're married to a lovely young Filipina in most cases, like I am, that they probably could never get a second look from if they were in America or the UK, but that they enjoy a marriage to such a woman here. And then they badmouth the very nation that this woman came from, which can't make any sense to me. So between my wife and I, we don't do this. We don't criticize the Filipino nation, because they're not there to be criticized. They are our host. I'm here on the hospitality of the Philippine nation, and as such I'm very grateful. I'm very grateful to my wife. I'm very grateful to all of my extended family who treat me very well. Now, one of the tough things that foreigners have to deal with is the question of money. Now, in my case, it's easy for me to say no if I'm asked for money, because a lot of the time I just don't have it. So you can't give what you don't have. You can't be what you're not. I'm not a rich man. I can't be like a rich man. I can't think that way. So we live modestly, and we try to help all extended family in every way that we can. So this is being part of a Filipina foreigner marriage. That you cannot expect to come and marry a Filipina and think that once she is married to you, she will turn her back on her family. And in a lot of cases, the reports that I get, the opinions that I hear, say that the Filipina family are always trying to get money. I don't believe this. I just don't believe it. I've seen I've seen instances where my own extended family have had to ask for help, and we haven't been able to give it. And I've seen how that upsets my wife, that we really can't afford to give what is being asked of us, because she knows how hard it is, her words, I know how hard it is for them to ask. So maybe I'm special. Maybe I've landed in with a special family that will not ask, because it doesn't happen. So I accept that I have a wife. Within easy reach, I have a mother-in-law. I have a brother-in-law who lives a little way over the hill that we have to help from time to time, who works very hard in return for any help that we give him. And I have a couple of sisters-in-law with their children who are in the same close community. And I accept being part of that. What I've observed with a lot of foreigners who are married to Filipinos is that they separate themselves from the family. They are separate. I try to think of myself as being part of this family. And that seems to me to be the only way to be married to a Filipina. Why is it important? Because your Filipina wife is watching you. Your Filipina wife knows what is in your heart. And if in your heart you don't want to give, she knows. Now, we all go here through times when we don't have anything. This is totally unreal to a Western thinking person. It would be unreal. But we actually don't have anything. We've gotten to maybe 1 week to go, and we're down to no money, because my pension is very, very modest. So we have to get through a week with no money. And yet, if a hungry child comes to our door from any of my in-laws, if an in-law comes and they have no rice, guess what? We don't say, sorry, we've only got enough for ourselves. We give them some of what we have. And this is more in keeping with some of the culture that I have myself. The Irish culture would never turn anybody away. If a guest arrived and they only had so much meat to share between the family, and a guest arrived, he would have a place at the table, and boy, they just put another couple of potatoes in the pot. And that's how they would manage. Would he be turned away? I don't think so. And that's how it is here. Even though we may only have a very limited amount of food, we share what we have. So here's the irony. I've come in as far as organized religion goes, as a non-believer, and here I am learning by example what it means to be Christian. Because a Christian will give without, I mean a true Christian. I've met a lot of full Christians, but a true Christian will welcome you to the table and share what they have without a big fanfare of doing it. They'll do it because that's the right thing to do. My mother-in-law handles things in a totally different way to me, and I think that we've already had this example where somebody crossed the line that was a neighbor and a friend. They crossed the line when they came to the house once. I cut them out of my life, Western style, attributed the blame. They're to blame, they were wrong. I don't want them around, they're not welcome here. My mother-in-law didn't do any of that. She continued to welcome them into the house. She never mentioned the misdemeanor. She never mentioned that. It was never mentioned again. She never did a guilt trip. She continued to welcome the person as a friend without judgment. And so she never lost a friend. She never lost a friend, never lost a neighbor, never lost a helper, and I did. Later, when the blood leaves the face and you're starting to think in a sane way, you can see that all of the things that you deprived that person of, your friendship, your caring, your support, your welcome, all of those things that you withheld from that person, you have lost yourself. Now, so much for Filipinas being simple. Simple thinking, yes. Is there anything to learn from a Filipina? Yes. They have a sense of kindness, a sense of acceptance, a sense of forgiveness, a sense of moving on, which is, in my experience, not existing in foreign lands. So it's been a learning experience for me to be married to a Filipina. Whereas I would be, as I said, attributing blame, a very common thing in the West. Got to find out who's to blame. Who did this? Who was responsible? Who can we hold accountable? And instead of just moving on and knowing that in an advancing time, all of this, whatever is happening at the time, will be forgotten and forgiven, because time does that. Instead of that, my wife can simply move on. If I start getting uptight about something, she'll just smile it away. And if you've seen any of the pictures of my wife smiling, it can't be ignored. And you can bluster and be cranky and grumpy all you like, it won't make any difference. Because Filipinos think differently. And that brings us to probably one of the biggest things, criticisms that men who are married to Filipinas have, and that is on money. Now, money is a commodity that is not a complete necessity for a Filipina who has been poor. When my wife was studying as a working student, she did a job, probably 2 jobs, and she studied as well to get her a university degree, and she worked very hard. Now, she lived in a painfully wretched boarding house which overlooked a river, which was floating free with trash. Not a wonderful life. She would work all the hours, study all the rest, and then go home to a boarding house which was probably a lot smaller than most people's bathroom in the West. And she would live there with enough room for a bed and a small cabinet to put clothes in and put a tiny TV on. That would be her existence. She would do that. She would get paid on a Friday, and on a Saturday morning she would send all of that money, I mean all of that money, to her parents to pay off debts, to help them, to support them, to show them a return on all of the love and support that they'd given her. It doesn't happen in America. It doesn't happen in the UK. It didn't happen with me. I was never as good a son as she is a daughter. So the day after she's been paid, she would be down to a few pesos. And she'd get a little pittance which she would get for her job, and she would somehow get through the month. And that was life for her. Now, how could I go in and expect her to have the same viewpoint of money as I do, even though I'm not a rich man and not actually terribly good at handling money even. But I know that you need to have money. You can't you can't go through your life, your week, your month with no money. You have to have money to eat. You have to have that. That noise is one of the ducks is walking on the tin roof. So anyway, yeah, you have to have money. Now, my wife is used to having no money, as I just illustrated to you. She would send all her money to her parents. She would send all her money to her parents. And she was quite accustomed to having no money. So now, if we ever reach a situation where we've got to go for another week or something and we've got no money, that's okay. We've got food. Well, we haven't got very much food. Well, we've got rice and soy sauce. And she would smile through it while I'm stressing and saying, for God's sake, you can't go through life with no money. She said, we'll be fine. And I hear this from other foreigners who are married to Filipinos, and they say that their wives are the same, that they've been on occasions without money. The wife just makes it all right. There's one of the biggest differences. Instead of criticizing, you just have to know that there's a little compromise and re-education that has to take place on the subject of money. There's the turkey's going to be fed. So the big difference is money and viewpoint, logic, training of children. If you come and you have children, better face up. You will have to be the policeman in the family. They will be undermining every disciplined move that you make because you're just plain being too hard. Well, yin and yang, I guess. So it can work. It does work because the joys of being married to a lovely, caring, loving woman are great. And I rest my case. This is a foreigner living in the Philippines, living happily in the Philippines. Please like, subscribe, share, comment. I'd love to hear your comments. And if there's anything that any question that you want answered, well, if it's a good question and it inspires us, we'll do a video on it. Both of us. Or together, separate. Whatever you want, we are happy to be inspired by your questions and comments. So, bye for now.